Fish and Wildlife Education Division at Nebraska Game and Parks, and I help host this series on behalf of the agency. Every month we learn about a new topic regarding conservation and environmental education, and it's really exciting to get to learn from both of our peers, some content experts, and just educators themselves, and like what they see in this field and some best practices. Today we're going to hear from Grace Gard. She's the aquatic ecology education specialist here at our division. And I'm going to give it over to her, and we're going to learn all about some incredible wetland education resources that her and a big team have been working on for several years now. So Grace, feel free to share your screen and get started.
Perfect. Thank you,
And
Amber.
I forgot to mention, as she's sharing her screen, if you do have questions throughout this presentation, feel free to put them in the chat. I'll be monitoring that. There'll be some time at the end for sure for some more questions and discussions, but I'll be checking that out too as we go along.
All right. Perfect. Yeah, so my presentation is called Creative Communication. We're going to talk all about what it looks like to create intentional resources that can lead us to positive outcomes for our ecosystem. So definitely want to give us an introduction a little bit to just me. Like Amber said, I'm the aquatic ecology education specialist for Nebraska Game and Parks. I've always had a huge love for being outside. A big part of that came from my grandparents. I was so fortunate, I had a cabin growing up. And so it was right on the lake, got lots of experiences fishing and more right around water. I have a bachelor's degree in fisheries and wildlife. And when I finished that, I knew I didn't really want to go into, research or anything. And I found environmental education, and that was like the perfect fit for me. So I worked at Fontenelle Forest and quite a few other nature-based organizations, but Fontenelle Forest was where I learned a lot. Worked there for about 5 years. So, and then I recently just also received my master's degree in teaching biology, and that was a really incredible program that actually Amber and I both have done called Project Dragonfly. And so I got to go to Belize and do a lot of in-person learning experiences. And so just have continued to like grow what I know and where my experiences come from. And now I've been at Nebraska Game and Parks for about, it's going to be 4 years. And so we do a lot of really cool programs. And this is a picture from one of our programs. So we have a lot of fun, but we also get to do some really cool work through the Fish and Wildlife Education Division. And so I just wanted to give a really quick, introduction to what we are, who we are. Amber and I are both in the Fish and Wildlife Education Division, and we offer a lot of resources to people, whether you're a teacher or an informal educator or just a member of the public. We do a lot of educator workshops, professional development. We try to do programs for adults like trivia and breweries, but we tie in nature. And a lot of community-focused programs, as well as creating resources. So creating those resources is kind of part of what we're going to talk about today, obviously. But just to give you a little background on also why we do what we do in our division, this comes from the North American Association for Environmental Education, which are kind of one of the leading groups that talk about environmental education in the US. And really this movement to try to help people understand our resources better leads to a lot more. It can transform lives and society. It will inform, inspire, and influence attitudes, motivate action. And environmental education is a key tool in expanding the environmental movement and creating healthier and more civically engaged communities. So just thought that was a good place to start to kind of help people understand like how I fit into this picture and how I ended up helping on this project that I'm going to tell you more about. And then I had created this graphic just to kind of show how we work and why, we know we have a lot of challenges with regards to the environment and our planet that exist, but we can't always start with those global challenges. We have to start somewhere that, can fit within our capacity. And so this just shows, we start with individuals, we make impacts on those around us, and that will continue to expand like a ripple effect to the larger global community. So yeah, we just want to make an impact on our own community here in Nebraska. But I think a lot of what I'm going to talk about can apply to other states, other countries. And Nebraska just has a really wide variety of ecological communities. And so if we want people to understand these communities better, we also have to understand our human communities and what they value. So I'm going to kind of talk about this through the Wetlands Outreach and Education Project, and use that as kind of the model for what it could look like if you wanted to make resources similar to this in order to help people better understand an ecosystem that is near you, or that needs more people to understand it better. So this is a project that's a compilation of educational resources that were created, offer the opportunity to learn about our diverse wetlands across our state. And it was led by Nebraska Game and Parks Commission, funded by a grant from the EPA, and partners on our project included Platte Basin Timelapse, Nebraska Cooperative Fish and Wildlife Research Unit, and Ducks Unlimited. So we had a lot of partners in this. And I think Ted might be on here, but Ted LaGrange is the person from Game and Parks who kind of was inspired when he visited one of his kids' classrooms, and he was asking them questions about wetlands, and the students had no idea what types of things existed in Nebraska, let alone our wetlands specifically. And he's our wetland program manager, so obviously he's very passionate about this. And so he kind of got this rolling. He actually did a similar project in 2005, but a lot of those resources were, VHS tapes and things that were getting fairly outdated. And so he enlisted the help from these other organizations, and especially Platte Basin Timelapse, who you can see in some of these photos, founded by Mike Forsberg and Mike Farrell. And then this team of producers you see below, Mariah, Ethan, Grant, and Dakota, were huge in helping us capture these wetlands in really beautiful and scientific ways. And so these partners were all really essential to us creating a really compelling set of resources, as well as just a really well-rounded project. So I just wanted to make sure to highlight, where this project kind of came from and why it was able to be as successful as it was. And if you don't know, if you're not from Nebraska, we have very unique wetlands across our state. And so this is kind of a quick map to just show you. We have sandhill wetlands, playas, riverine wetlands, and saline wetlands in the east, whereas the alkaline wetlands are kind of more in the west, and they're very similar quality like. And so this project had a lot of goals, but I'll just give you a quick glimpse. So I'm going to do this a couple times throughout the presentation just to hop on to show you a quick video. A good glimpse at what we're creating here. All right. So that's a very, very fast glimpse at, some of the products that we were making throughout this project. And I'll go through a quick set of what the deliverables were for this project. And hopefully this will help you know kind of what we've created as we've gone on to help people better understand our wetlands. So the big thing that Ted especially worked on with graphic designers was the guide to Nebraska's wetlands and their conservation needs. So this really describes our wetland types, discusses a lot more scientifically like their functions, classifications, listing of wetland plants and animals is also provided. So this would be really helpful for definitely more adults and like people maybe who are landowners. We also created a wetlandology kids magazine. And so if anyone is from Nebraska and familiar, we create Trail Tales magazines, and we also have a series called the Ologies. So we try to make different series of magazines focused on specific things. So we made one specifically all about our Nebraska wetlands with fun activities, definitely designed for educators to use in their classroom. And then especially something that Platte Basin Timelapse contributed was a feature film for each wetland type. So these are fairly long. You can probably see the timing here in the corners. So some of them are like 20 minutes, but a few of them are more like 30. So they do take a little bit of commitment to watch, but they are just amazing. And we'll definitely take a look at a couple of those as we go on. So the big thing with this project, and if you're considering, kind of telling the stories in a similar way, these partnerships were so essential, and we really brought in a lot of partners with many fields of expertise. It wasn't just one group doing the whole thing. And so I think that, along with having a really diverse advisory team, we had educators, community members that gave us a best product we could make. We also did a lot of listening and collaborating. And also, I would say we practiced a lot of humility in our group. I feel like we really enjoyed being around one another. And we spent a lot of time together because this project took a lot of effort. And so I think these things are kind of essential moving forward with a project like this, where you just kind of have to check your ego throughout the process and make sure that you're really working together as you try to create this series of products that will tell the story of the ecosystem that's important. So the first thing I'll kind of go through as we go through this presentation, I'll talk about the different kind of things you want to ask yourself as you go through this process. So first thing is like asking yourself, what do you want as an end result from this series of materials, resources you're going to create, or a project? What do you want people to know? How do you want them to feel? Maybe what you want them to do as a result. So we knew this answer to this question pretty early on. Ted especially led us through this and did an excellent job of, keeping us on track. We wanted Nebraskans to know, and other people outside of Nebraska, that we have diverse wetlands. So there's not just like one puddle of water and they're all the same. We also wanted people to understand that wetlands are valuable to people and to wildlife. And we wanted people, as a result of this, to conserve Nebraska's wetlands in the ways that they can. And so as you're going through thinking about what you want from a project, it's important to kind of think about physical actions you want from people, or mental actions, or the state of being. Like, we want them to inherently value our wetland ecosystems. So knowing those things really help to guide us as we move forward. Again, when you know your motivation, really helps you clearly establish your goals and ensure that everyone is on the same page of like, what are we trying to create here and tell people. And this is a foundation for our entire project, which is really interwoven in this next topic, which is knowing your audience. So if you're an educator, you're probably kind of familiar with this, but if not, this was kind of, I think, somewhere where I stepped in a little more to like help us think about who our audience might be. And I thought it might be helpful to add in a couple definitions. So your audience would be a group of people who are going to use your product essentially, or gather together to listen or watch these videos that we are creating. And so things that you have to think about when you're thinking about an audience is like, what are the demographics? What's the size of your group? What kind of setting are they going to engage with your products in? What do they maybe already know? What's going to motivate them or change their attitudes about wetlands? So who do you want to engage? What do they need to know, and why do they need to know it, are really important questions to ask at the very beginning, to help you think about where you want your audience to be by the end of the time that they engage with the product that you're going to create or experience or resource, whatever it might be. So we were definitely thinking about these things. And so if you stop and think about different audiences, just for example, think about fourth graders. You might know a student in your life who's about 9 or 10. They care about very different things than maybe someone who is 65 or older. Now, they might have some things they definitely share in common as well, but overall, there are definitely going to be things that each of those audiences are motivated by that are very different from one another. So just things that we had to think about as we were questioning, like, who is our audience and what do we want them to take away from these materials? So one thing that I kind of ended up bringing forth in this project as well, that wasn't an original part of the project, was making some bonus videos that are really intended for that student audience. So one of them is all about wetland plant adaptations. So we used Nebraska state science standards to really understand, like, what are they learning at certain points during their elementary to middle school career. And so then we tried to make some videos that would align with those pretty well. And so another quick hop to a video, we wanted to create those videos, but then they will also be paired with some really cool lesson plans that different educators for different age groups can use in different ways, because a kindergartner is going to engage with this video much differently than maybe a sixth grader. So you can just check this out as a quick clip from one of the plant adaptation videos, or the video that we made.
This next plant is sure to blow your mind. At least that's what it does with its seeds. The plant known as jewelweed grows on the edges of wetlands, kind of like the cattail. In midsummer, they begin to develop flowers that almost look like orchids. They are beautiful structures. Once the flower is pollinated by an insect or even a hummingbird, they develop into an oval-shaped fruit pod structure. Inside, seeds. And what does that plant want to do with its seeds? Spread them or disperse them far and wide. Accidentally brush up against this seed pod and this plant's seeds will go flying. What an amazing adaptation.
All right, so you might think that sounds like slightly funny because I'm using words like structures, but all of that is super intentional, because those are words that students around those ages, like 4th to 6th grade, are going to be learning. So we really wanted to align this with something that could be used in the classroom. These videos are shorter. And so overall, we just really wanted to create, I think, a good experience for different audiences, even because reaching everyone, like we want to reach everyone, is a little too broad, and it's going to be really hard for you to connect to your audience and really see the end results with like conservation or things that you want to see happen. So we really wanted to create resources that could be used very specifically, maybe by certain audiences that are interested, and we want to capture that a little more. But we also want to reach some brand new people that have no background knowledge about this. So yeah, we really tried to think through our audience in that way. We also had to think about how we were going to tell the story. So when you think about your audience, they're going to receive it best, potentially receiving it in a certain way, but also storytelling can look different. We're communicating knowledge with this. We're exchanging a common system of symbols, signs, or behaviors with our communication. And so basically this brings together storytelling, science communication, and education to basically use narrative and science in a simpler, but definitely not simplistic form to engage and educate regarding scientific topics. And I know that sometimes people think we're like dumbing things down as educators, but that is the furthest thing from what we do. And so this kind of graphic came from a study by Zalzer, and I just feel like this graphic does such a good job of kind of showing what this entire wetlands project has been able to do. So if you look at this, it's kind of a lot to look at, but if you start with the scientist and you see within the scientific community, there's jargon and there's a lot of heavy science. And sometimes that jargon feels, it's very easy to understand it within maybe the academic space or within the scientific space, but very difficult for anyone outside of that space to understand. So if you want them to understand it a little bit better, a lot of times that means cutting down unnecessary jargon and replacing it with graphics that help make it more simple to understand, less time processing it in your brain. Because if there's a way to do that, it opens up a whole new realm where you can use these graphics for media and education so that there's a better understanding. You can see there's more accessibility. People are connecting a little bit more with their emotions, but that jargon has gone a lot further down. Whereas you still see the science and the quality of the science exists there. It's not going away. Also, if you kind of think about the public, we like to connect with our emotions, and sometimes science has kept us from that, but there's a lot of value in using these fine arts. So like what Platte Basin Timelapse has done, creating a lot of these videos for us, and using really incredible photography to make this stuff more accessible. The science, again, stays high quality, but that jargon just doesn't exist anymore, and it makes it a space where the public and massive outreach can happen. And all of this does circle back, just like the scientific process, to our decision makers who give feedback to scientists, and it's kind of this really cool loop. So I love this and wanted to include this in here from this study, where graphic design is really helpful in the education realm, fine arts even more helpful for just having science and storytelling be able to be more effective. So we have to ask ourselves, who are the characters? Are they people? Are they animals? Who are we trying to tell a story of? What are their stories? We started with lots of stories up on a big whiteboard at the start of this project. And it took a lot of partnerships with our landowners and the people's stories we wanted to tell as well. And then knowing why these stories are valuable to the end goal of what we're trying to accomplish. We used a lot of art forms for this: photography, videography, illustration, and graphics. You could even go as far as theater, even though we didn't do that too much in this project. But there are a lot of scientific articles out there about people using theater to explain hard concepts. There's also a lot of technology that's used. So really quick, just to show you all, if you go to Platte Basin Timelapse link tree, they have a lot of links here, but essentially, if you haven't heard of an Esri story map before, these are really cool technology that they've used to kind of first tell the story of the photographer, but then as you move further into, they use lots of images. They've got video throughout this Esri story map. A lot of times they'll have geographically tagged things to where they found them, but it's a really compelling way of kind of sharing their experiences in the wetland as they were documenting them, and potentially just having a more visually appealing article or something to read. So that's another type of technology that they used. Lots of drone work, underwater cameras, trail cameras. And of course, then we also incorporated education best practices like knowing your audience, what type of language to use, understanding how learning can happen for people, or creating a learner-centered environment. And so I had kind of asked if you could hear perspectives. There were many perspectives from this project, right? Ted would tell you something, any of the Platte Basin Time-lapse producers would tell you something. And so I got a quote from Ethan, who you'll notice has taken a lot of photos that are in this whole presentation, pretty much all of them. And so he just talks about this format of storytelling is valuable because we can show people they don't need to travel far to have impactful experiences in nature. And hopefully after viewing the videos, people will be encouraged to get outside and start exploring Nebraska's wetlands. So we hope that these videos will become more than just, something that you can watch. So really fast, I wanted to show, I might not show, well, I think I have time. I've tagged this location as called Marsh Wren Community Wetland. And you can see, if you're familiar with Nebraska, Omaha is on the very eastern border, and we've got Lincoln, our capital city. And so Marsh Wren is a wetland just outside of Lincoln. And they put up a trail camera or a game camera up in a tree in this wetland. And so this just kind of, I think, captures what we can do when we combine the arts and storytelling with our scientific information. So yeah, that's the tree that they set that up in, and it was right outside of Lincoln. And I think there's just a lot of value in, first of all, hopefully that was really cool to watch, and that's like our first reaction. I remember the first time I watched when they shared that video, and I was just like, enthralled. And I think that's the really cool thing that our ecosystems can do, is like help us experience awe. But then I think after I thought about this video more, there were so many other ways that I was like, if you didn't notice, there were at least 22 different species in that one, span of time. I don't know exactly how long they had that camera up for, but in a classroom setting, you can use that in so many ways, where you can have students identifying species, or at least counting how many different kinds. And so I think the more we can be creative with these sorts of things, where we're also connecting students to species that are right in their own state and not like across the country, I think that's huge. So the work that was done to create this sort of resource, I just think can be used in so many different ways. So
Grace,
this was, yeah.
I was going to mention, Melissa mentioned it worked amazing. I want to visit
Yeah.
Nebraska Wetlands now, and she's from Texas. So
I love
excellent.
it. Yes, it's doing its job.
And we had that same experience when we presented this at a course in person. A lot of the people who saw this afterwards, they said, I want to go there this weekend now. So
Right.
such a cool tool.
Yeah, it's super cool. And I think a lot of times, I mean, this is true for me. If I don't see it, I don't always know that it exists, and so for some, if it's harder to travel far, this is something that's accessible, but also like motivating. So yeah, thanks for that comment, Melissa. Yeah, so we just really learned the value of weaving together lots of these different methods of storytelling to create a really amazing product. We know that people aren't one-dimensional, so our approaches to storytelling shouldn't be either. So, and I think including many stakeholders throughout this whole process was huge to tell a really well-rounded story. Like if you saw earlier, there was the horse pulling someone who was like kneeboarding, and that's use of a wetland, right? The people on a ranch in Nebraska were using their wetland in that way. So people use these spaces differently, and same with all of our wildlife. And so I think being able to tell a full story was really, really awesome. Also just being authentic, intentional, and really relevant. And so I'm gonna also stop for a second here and show you a clip from the Sandhills video. So as you can see over here, we've got our whole playlist. So you could watch these at any time outside of this. But I just pulled one story out of the Sandhills story, because usually these are split into chapters. And I thought this was just another cool way to show the work that scientists are doing in Nebraska, tell about it really authentically, and in some ways maybe make it relatable. So we'll just let this go. This is about 5 or so minutes.
The Sandhills are like mountains in Nebraska. They are mountainous sand dunes with wetlands peppered in between. The sandhills are magic. A Blanding's turtle is a semi-aquatic species. They're easy to identify. They don't look like any other turtle in Nebraska. They have a high domed carapace, so they look like a helmet, and they have a very long neck, and along the bottom side of that neck and on their chin, they have a bright yellow coloration. They have that curvature on their upper lip, and so they look like they're always smiling. Blanding's turtles are important to the wetlands for a lot of reasons. I mean, I'm a little bit biased because I am a Blanding's turtle researcher. Female Blandings. This is number 26. So she has the radio transmitter so that I can find her again. This is a really productive wetland. I have caught a majority of my turtles at this site. So I currently have 7 adult Blandings with transmitters on here. And that's the most I've ever had at a site, so that's pretty exciting. They have their part just like anything else in the wetland, so they're helping to control the crustacean and insect populations in our wetlands, as well as they move between wetland habitats, they carry some vegetation with them, and so they're helping to spread seeds and they help with plant biodiversity. The number one threat to Blanding's turtles are us. We alter and drain wetland habitats, and that is detrimental to the species. So, like all turtles, Blanding's turtles are experiencing declines throughout their distribution because of habitat destruction and alteration. Blanding's turtles are considered imperiled or threatened in every location throughout their distribution except for Nebraska. The sandhills provide a refuge for this species. There was a study done back in 2004 by Dr. Jeffrey Lang at Valentine National Wildlife Refuge, and that was the last in-depth study of Blanding's turtles. But he estimated that there was about 130,000 Blanding's turtles at the refuge alone. And so that would be the largest population of Blanding's turtles in the world.
These are just a record of our earlier project. We started in 2002. So I came back because I actually have a project going on in India. I haven't been able to go to India because of the whole COVID situation. And I thought, well, okay, I guess this is the time we go back to Valentine and see whether the turtles are still there. So it just happened to be approximately 2 decades or 20 years afterwards. One of the most dramatic things, I guess I've learned, is that nothing stays the same. So this place has changed. There's been an enormous increase just recently in the wetland habitats. It's kind of exciting because now, I'm getting a better sense of how adaptable this turtle is and how able the turtle is to utilize available wetlands. So with more wetlands, probably going to be more turtles. Turtle experts in the world would consider the Valentine Refuge a very special place because the importance of the refuge as a refuge for the Blanding's turtle. So even though the refuge was set up back in the day primarily for migratory waterfowl, there are many, many other incredibly valuable species of plants and animals that are here.
So we have here in the Sandhills a really precious resource that we need to protect, and it's also something that we need to research and understand so that we can help inform conservation management strategies for populations in other places of its distribution. Doesn't look like anyone's home.
The objective when I applied for my special use permit to come back to the refuge, and what was I going to do? I said, I hope we can catch some of the turtles we marked 20 years ago. Now, just guessing based on the data that we have so far, I think we're going to end up with a whole lot of younger turtles.
A stair step here.
Yeah. So see, this guy what was the weight on that one? 42, right? Most of these are less than 20 years old, which means they weren't around before. And so these are all new turtles. And we're marking them, I guess, because, I hope somebody will be able to follow up and find out what these turtles are doing maybe in another 5 years, 10 years, 20 years.
They're a dream to work with, and I would love to continue working with them and be a Blandings turtle expert.
All right. So that was a 5-6 minute glimpse of the Sandhills film, and just one of the stories that is told throughout this entire project. And so I think that it was just a cool way for us to show some really authentic research that's happening in Nebraska, feature a really honestly adorable species in our sandhill wetlands. And so we just really tried to think about those things throughout the entire project and tell compelling stories, be sure to interpret for our audience. So you notice we put the word carapace up on the screen because that's kind of a tough word that if you're not, a biologist, you might not know that word. And so we really tried to be intentional about that. And even you'll notice there's really cool music throughout. And so all of these things just add up to make it more relatable, more interesting for our audience and their lived experiences essentially. So we really think it's important to relate to them as much as possible. And so I would say the biggest lesson learned here was oftentimes we might forget we live in a conservation bubble. Even our team jokes about that a lot. We have our own language that we think is common, or ways of thinking that we think is common, but it's not common when we pause and look outside of ourselves. I know even one time during the project, we posed the question of imagine if you showed this to your mom or your aunt or uncle, are they in conservation? Because if they're not, they're probably not going to know this word or that thing. And so we really wanted to think about those things as we created these products for the end result. And definitely this was a process to create something very quality, which I feel like we have done. Collaboration, I know I probably already said that once, but it's just so huge. So there were many times where we sat in a meeting for at least 8 hours where we would watch each film, give feedback, take time to go. They would take time, the Platte Basin Timelapse producers would take time to go back through things. And so lots and lots of time that Ted essentially kept us going on that and checking back in and making sure we were on the right track. And I thought this was kind of cool. Platte Basin Timelapse pulled this together. They spent total of 295 days out in the field across the state, filming and doing work outdoors. And then twice that amount of time was spent in their offices at their computers, editing and doing all the other work that it takes to create these really well polished films, edited photographs. There's just a lot that goes into it. Even still things that are going into it on my end, creating more educational resources. And so this is definitely something that's taking time, but it's totally worth the time that it's taken us because I think we've created a series of really wonderful products for people to use, and that will hopefully meet the needs of a very diverse audience and many different kinds of platforms that we use, right? Because there's social media, YouTube, there's just a lot of options out there for how people engage with this stuff. A quick thing, if you can think about it, if you're doing or thinking about a project similar, making things measurable is huge. So, on YouTube, we can see how many people have watched a video, and that kind of stuff can be really helpful. So the more you can measure the success, the better. And then I think the biggest thing with this project that we all felt at the end is that it doesn't have to end, especially with the end products. And so I think it spans way beyond this. Just a quick glance, like when we think about how can we get our communities to engage with these spaces, make them more accessible to people, just a quick glance back at those story maps, like here's the urban one. We'll see, they've included maps, so that you can easily navigate this on the Esri story map and maybe find yourself a wetland to visit. So it's really cool to think about, all of these are public spaces where people would be allowed to go and check them out. And so we tried to do this in urban areas, obviously also in rural areas. And so I think that was also huge, trying to brainstorm, how can we make these spaces accessible for people? Because we hope that after being engaged by the videos, people will be motivated to go out there and check it out and explore. We also do some public events and outreach opportunities. I know I've recently planned with Ted and a Platte Basin Timelapse member. We're going to do a saline wetlands exploration event in May, which will probably be a simple hike, but sometimes people will feel more comfortable going out with a guide to kind of help them navigate the space. And so I think creating those spaces where people can come together, learn about their environment in a safe space is really essential. And another thing that I mentioned before our team does is those kayak cleanups. So we're getting people into wetlands. They might not think of it as a wetland, but hopefully we can instill a sense of, conservation action, like we're having a direct positive impact on our environment. And then we're going to see those spaces more as places we want to take care of. So I think there's lots of ways that this can look, and this is some of the ways that are tangible for us that we're going to proceed forward with. And there's so many more. So if you're interested in knowing more, if you're from Nebraska and you want to know more about when these types of events might be taking place, definitely follow our Nebraska Wildlife Education Facebook page, because we tend to post a lot of events on there. We also have the Nebraska Game and Parks outdoor calendar. So that's pretty huge too. But this page on Facebook is just this type of event. And so be a good thing to check out if you're interested. And then, just a quick hop back over. So if you want to know more about this project and all it has to offer, if you go to nebraskawetlands.com, it will take you to this page on the Game and Parks website. And there's just a lot of different things that can be found here. Infographics, you can find all the links to the videos. If you want to request the Wetlands Guide, or if you want to request Wetlandology magazines for students, this is where you can do those things and find, again, just like a lot more information there. So that's a nice resource just to know about that we're going to continue working on. And
Grace, I mentioned that we'll send out an email shortly after this with the recording of this and also all the amazing links that you're pointing to today. Yeah. So if you're trying to write down really quick as she hovers over the URL box, no worries. We'll send all the links in an email shortly after this.
Yeah, we'll definitely be sure to share those things. And obviously there's so much I haven't shown that will be, found in those longer videos or found in those educational videos, which aren't released yet. The ones for students aren't released yet, but they will be in the next probably month. So all of that is coming. We're going to continue hopefully sharing about this project in a lot of different ways. So we're really excited about, I think, what we've created and all of the potential that it has to kind of reach people where they're at, and hopefully motivate them to, get outside and explore wetlands. And we did have a whole, it wasn't on that map, but we have a whole film all about urban wetlands, because we understand not everyone can make it to the sand hills in Nebraska. That I grew up in Nebraska and I didn't even really go there until 2 years ago. So I think that these are important ways to be intentional, and we're excited to kind of keep getting feedback on them. They just were released in on the 2nd of February, so it hasn't even been a full month that they've been out there. So yeah, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat or yeah, whatever you'd like to do. But thank you everyone for being here today, and hopefully this was helpful just in understanding what we've made here and how we hope to use it. So
people are really excited. They want to watch all the videos, which I agree. That's going to be my goal this year, is to get them all watched in the evenings, right?
yeah.
Ted said wonderful presentation. Catherine said excellent presentation and wonderful information. Thank you. So very cool.
Okay.
It was so cool to see. I know I've watched you work on this for years now. So it's cool to see it all like wrapping up. And it's cool, like what you mentioned is you don't even know, like when you put it out into the world now, how people or teachers or, educators are going to be able to use this. It's going to be really cool to be able to see that and see that feedback. So
Yeah, I'm excited to. I think we're just going to continue building on it. And yeah, there's a lot, I think, more that people who are part of this project would probably have to add to, but I'm glad that it was good at covering everything.
we do have one question. To your knowledge, does Nebraska have any bogs?
So this is a good question. I wouldn't say that they're called bogs, but I believe a fen,
And
Fen, are similar, and the sandhills definitely have fens in them. And you'll actually, like, if you watch that whole sandhills video, one of the chapters is all about fens.
cool.
So they spent some time exploring them, and they're pretty cool. So yeah, like you jump on the grass and it's like a waterbed type.
That's cool.
It's crazy.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Mariah said, fantastic work. I'll definitely use these resources in classes I teach. That's so cool.
Yes, and hopefully just keep watching for more. I know our website's going to get an upgrade, so it might be a little like weird transition, but we'll be sure to share as many links as we can, so you'll be able to get to the right place and find these resources once they're like fully out there. So, but definitely the longer videos are out there for everyone to watch. So
Awesome.
glad we'll be sending them out to instructional coaches. That's perfect.
Very cool. Does anyone else have any other questions for Grace? All right. Well, thank you so much, Grace. That was excellent. And thanks everyone for participating today. We'll be sending out an email shortly with a full recording of this presentation, as well as all the links to all the resources that she shared today. And hopefully we'll see you next month for our next topic, which will be talking about the wildlife survey, the wildlife watching survey. And we'll learn more about what people in our country, how they feel about wildlife, how they value wildlife, based on a national survey that was just done. So that'll be really exciting to hear and discuss. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Have a great day.